Hello, and welcome to the Feeling Good podcast, where you can learn powerful techniques to change the way you feel. I am your host, Rhonda Borowski, and joining me here in the Murrieta studio is Dr. David Burns. Dr. David Burns is a pioneer in the development of cognitive behavioral therapy and the creator of the new teen therapy. He is the author of Feeling Good, which has sold over 5 million copies in the United States and has been translated into over 30 languages. David is currently an emeritus adjunct professor of clinical psychiatry at Stanford University School of Medicine.
Hello, Dave.
Hello, David. And hello, Michael.
Hello.
Hello, Michael.
Hi, David.
Welcome to episode 168. The wonderful Rhonda is unable to be here, so I am sitting in for her and will do my best to carry on the high standard that she has created. And we'd like to introduce Michael Simpson. I don't know, Michael, if you'd like to do a quick intro on yourself.
Absolutely. So my name is Michael Simpson. I've been actually working with David, helping him revamp his website for the last 3 months, and in exchange he has been helping me with my social anxiety.
So and that'll be our next podcast.
And that'll be the next podcast. So if you're excited to hear all about my social anxiety, then tune into the next podcast. Yep, that's who I am.
All right.
Excellent.
All right. Well, thank you both, and I love working with both of you, and it's kind of fun to see you in the driver's seat, Dave, today. Rhonda's fantastic, but you've made wonderful contributions with your heart and brilliant skills and mind to the podcasts. And we've had a lot of, with that I've sent you positive feedback from people really liking your presence on the podcast. Dave is a layperson, not a mental health professional, as is Michael. And a lot of people have been saying, well, that's really cool to have, real human beings on your podcast as well as shrinks. So today we'll have a lot of real human beings and one shrink.
Well, thank you. And speaking of kind words, I thought I'd read just a couple, some great feedback from the podcast where we had Brandon and Heather doing their music. So this is from Indrani, and she wrote, this was one of my favorite podcasts. Heather, Brandon, Rhonda, and David created magic. It also helped me attack my own shame. During one of Heather's songs about not being good enough, tears rolled down my eyes, and I was at the gym. I saw the stairs, but I continued listening, and then it happened again when Brandon sang Tiny Anna. So for now, I'm cured of feeling embarrassed and out of place. Powerful stuff, music.
Yeah.
Some more congratulations, Heather and Brandon. You guys are amazing and sound fabulous. Thank you for your gift of writing music. And there's several more just like this.
All on the music
all
episode?
on the music, yeah.
Yeah. Well, it was great to have them. I did get one almost like a death threat from somebody because of that episode. A very angry fellow who doesn't like it when I'm not totally serious. So that was sad to see that. But I thought it was great. I think music can lift the soul, and I think Brandon and Heather have done some creative work in bringing the ideas of Team CBT to music. And it was great to see that so many people enjoyed that. And then yesterday we had it's not yesterday when this will be recorded, but we had them back for a second time on listening to a different kind of music, like hearing what people are saying when they're criticizing you, so you can use the disarming technique and the 5 secrets of effective communication skillfully. So we've got some... Just
for the listeners, that is episode 160. And
right.
161 also has some more Brandon and Heather.
And we'll have no commercial messages today because I don't have any... I forgot to print out upcoming workshops, but if you want training, we had just 2 days ago, I did with Jill the workshop on therapeutic empathy and the 5 secrets of effective communication. We were sold out as usual in person in Palo Alto, and then we had another 60 or more people online, and it was tremendously successful. But also it became clear how hard it is, even for mental health professionals, to use the five secrets. It's pretty humbling, and yet the world needs the five secrets, but it's love techniques that lead to greater love and compassion and connection don't come easily, because we also automatically want to defend ourselves and argue and blame. So what's up for today?
So today we have some more Ask Davids. So we've got several great questions here, and how about if we just jump in?
Yep.
Okay. This comes from Alex. Hi, David. Hopefully this reaches you well. I'm dealing with a fear of blushing and have been having issues with going out with friends, being in public, in work meetings, etc. The weird part is that I don't even get red, but the visualization in my head is so vivid sometimes that I believe it. I've been facing my fears...
Kool-Aid, man. What does that mean?
There's a drink called Kool-Aid.
Oh yeah, we had it growing up. Yeah. So cherry Kool-Aid.
I think it's a great image.
Yeah, the Kool-Aid man. And sorry, Alex, I'm slightly condensing your letter.
That's okay.
I've been facing my fears in going out into public and hanging out with friends. I'm kind of anxious on the inside of getting red all of a sudden, which puts me on edge. I look in the mirror and I see that I'm not red, but it's been hard to train my brain to believe it. I started reading your book, When Panic Attacks, 5 days ago, and it has helped a lot already. Since then, I have been able to accept. I don't mind being occasionally red or nervous, and I'm fairly confident, but I struggle to accept the idea of being perpetually red. Part of me wants to accept the idea, hey, I'm red, that's who I am, but another part of me knows that it's not true. Occasionally, I might blush, but it's not the norm. Please let me know if you have any advice. I think this might be a great podcast topic because I know a lot of people deal with anxiety, and I'm sure that would help a lot of others. Best, Alex.
Well, thank you, Alex. That's a great question because it touches so many people, including, to one extent or another, some of us who are talking to you today on this podcast. None of us have had fear of blushing, but I think I've struggled with 5 different kinds of social anxiety in my life, and Michael's going to do a great podcast we're going to record right after this on your social anxiety, Michael. So I have several things to say, and you guys can jump in too. You want to start off? You have any empathy for this fellow, Michael?
Oh well, I mean, first off, yeah, I haven't personally suffered from blushing, but my heart goes out to you. It sucks thinking, like, having to wonder if you're going to blush in public, or wondering if a social interaction is going to go a certain way. And I commend you for seeking help. And I'm glad you read the When Panic Attacks books, because I also found that one very helpful. It's got a lot of really good models in there. Yeah. Great,
thanks for that. Now, another thing is that on the website, if you go to www.feelinggood.com, there's tons of free resources, and Michael's actually redoing my website, so it's going to be even more awesome in a week or two when we get the new version published. But in the right-hand panel of every page, there's a search function, and so if you put in blushing, you get tons of great resources, including podcast number 88, where I treat a colleague named Alicia from our Tuesday group who turns bright red and had an intense fear of blushing, thinking people would judge her as less than or look down on her, think she's kind of stupid or something like that because she's blushing. And because that's live therapy in action, I think you'll love that. And the real issue from a cognitive therapy point of view is there's 2 issues. First, are people going to be judging you so severely because you blush? And then the second thing is, if people were judging you, is that something that has to make you upset? Because you see, you're not afraid, Alex, of other people judging you for blushing, but there is one person who does judge you really severely for blushing, and that's Alex. and you haven't accepted it yourself, and you're telling yourself that you have inner thoughts. I don't know exactly what they are, but that it'd be awful if somebody saw me blushing, and if somebody didn't like me, it would be a kind of a terrible thing. And working on those underlying beliefs and overcoming the fear of rejection or disapproval, like I just told you, like on the music podcast. Someone who has at times been a huge fan became intensely judgmental toward me and kind of saying, Dr. Burns is dead now because of this horrible podcast he did, which was actually a podcast a lot, thousands of people loved. But does that mean I'm less worthwhile if someone is judging me or looking down on me? And I have many flaws too, and if someone judges me for my flaws, I would just say, yeah, boy, I have more flaws than the ones you notice, and I've kind of accepted it, and that can be a chance for personal growth and personal enlightenment. But I think you'll love that podcast. Now let's talk about another one, some of the techniques you can use to overcome the fear of blushing. And I don't throw techniques at someone based on a problem, and I can't do therapy in this medium either, but I can just show you some of the techniques we might be using in the context of a team CBT therapy session, which would include empathy and melting away resistance and a lot of things before we get on to methods. But one method is exposure, and you can help us a little on this. But one thing you could do, Alex, would be to approach 20 strangers. And in the next podcast, you'll hear how we actually did this in reality yesterday. But you can just stop a number of strangers on the street and say, could I speak to you for a moment? I've always had the fear of blushing all my life. And I don't often blush, but I'm just terrified of blushing, and so I've been hiding this from everybody because of feelings of shame. But today I've decided to stop hiding and stop being ashamed, and so I've decided to tell people, and that's why I'm telling you. And that would be exposure. Michael?
Yeah, and I think that I've done something similar for my social anxiety, and I think this is a great approach because you see... what I would add to that, even if you wanted to go further, is you could say, "Oh, and would you judge me for blushing?"
Would you think less of me?
Would you think less of me? And then you could even go further, because I know if I ask people that question about social anxiety, and I'm like, "Oh, do you judge me? Are you like looking down on me because I am socially anxious?" And then I said something like, "Yeah, but because then almost everybody said no." No. Oh, they'd say a mixture between no and dude, I don't even know you. Why would I have an opinion? And then you could say something like, well, are you just being nice, or you really don't judge me? Because it sounds like you might be concerned about people judging. And I think the other thing you might try is, I wonder what you do in the moment when you are blushing and you're with someone.
Yeah, and that's where you can use self-disclosure.
And you can, instead of, you haven't really written that in your letter, but I wonder if you try to hide it, or do you leave the room, or do you just sit there and hope that nobody notices? Because one thing you could try that I know worked really well for me with social anxiety is just calling attention to it and saying, "Oh, it looks like I'm blushing." I don't know the words you would use. David could help you on that one. But
yeah, did you say if I look bright red, that's probably because I'm blushing?
Probably because I'm blushing.
And I often call myself Kool-Aid man. So
yeah.
Something just to bring it to conscious awareness, because it's the shame and not the blushing. The blushing is never a problem for a human being. It's only the shame that you feel in the cover-up. It's not the crime. It's the cover-up. It's
right.
The same deal here.
Yeah, and the key is to bring it, if you're going to do that and use that approach, you're going to need to figure out how to say it in a way that isn't needy or pathetic. Yeah. You can have to own it and be like, "Oh, I'm blushing," or you might notice that I'm blushing, or it's because of XYZ.
Yeah.
What about in this case? It sounds like he's actually not blushing. He's
right.
He thinks he is, but he looks in the mirror and he's not seeing anything. So does that Does that
You
change
could
any
say
of this?
if I turn bright red, it
Yeah.
means I'm blushing because I'm so excited about what you just said,
Yeah.
or something like that.
Yeah, no, there's a good point. Like, yeah, I think it would still work if even if you're not blushing.
Yeah, you could say I'm feeling really self-conscious. I don't know if I'm blushing, but you know.
And then the last point I would add on this is because I've actually implemented this advice that David's giving you with the social anxiety, like I said, and then so with the spiel that he said, I would add a question to the end of it because I said, "Are you judging me?" But you could have any kind of question like, Do you experience any kind of blushing, or you look like a pretty confident person? So I imagine you don't have a problem like this. But I'm wondering have you experienced any feelings of anxiety around people? Because the problem with just saying, "Oh, can I speak to you?" and like I've had this fear of blushing, and then stopping talking is that the other person doesn't really know what to do.
Yeah, and you don't want to set them up to try to give you advice
Yeah.
or to try to help you because that's really, really boring. One last thing that I wanted to mention is we have a new member of our training group at Stanford in our Sunday hiking group, Dr. Zak, Z-A-K, who is a lovely lady dermatologist from Stanford. And she wants to learn some of these cool psychotherapy techniques because they also have applications in the medical profession, how to communicate more effectively with patients who are anxious. But she mentioned to us at the dim sum following the Sunday hike a couple of weeks ago that one of the things she treats with lasers is people whose face is naturally red. And she showed movies at dim sum how they can hit that with lasers, and apparently it's very effective. Now, the fear of blushing is called erythrophobia, but this has a different name. I can't remember the name, but you know how some people, even if they're not blushing, their face just looks real red. And that, she showed us, that's because of too many blood vessels near the skin, and so they just laser them, and then it goes away. So that's another medical treatment that might be of some interest to people, plus but she's a fantastic physician and dermatologist.
I just have one quick question with regard to Alex. I mean, given that it sounds like, or reads like, he doesn't actually blush. He has a fear of blushing, but doesn't actually blush. Is it possible that you could treat the I'm blushing as a distorted thought and look and approach it that way?
Yeah. I love what you're saying, and actually, you know, we could think of 30 techniques to be helpful to Alex. We just threw out a couple ideas, but if he picks up a copy of the book When Panic Attacks, or my earlier book, The Feeling Good Handbook, they have tons of techniques to help with social anxiety, every kind of anxiety, fear of blushing. There's actually 40 techniques when panic attacks alone. So yes, and we have the idea of fail as fast as you can. Try technique after technique until you find the one that you hit a home run with, and sometimes you find it really fast, and sometimes you have to try and fail with many techniques.
Do we know that Alex is male, by the way?
I was wondering that myself.
Yeah, and
we
so
don't know.
Alex, if you're a female, apologies. Which is not clear from your letter as to whether you're male or female.
Yeah. Alrighty.
All right.
Number one. Number two.
Number two, something I imagine a few folks could relate to. How can you get over a broken heart? So from Dee Dee. First of all, I would like to hi David. First of all, I would like to thank you from the bottom of my heart for the wonderful jobs you're doing. I have a question regarding aftermath of divorce and searched feelinggood.com for any posts, but I couldn't find any. My best friend is going through divorce and he cannot forget the good memories he had with his wife. He still loves her so much and would like to continue a good life, but she's not interested in that. They have been separated for 4 years and he tried his best to bring her back. How can I help him move forward? Those good memories are haunting him.
Thanks, Dee Dee. Right?
Yes, that is
okay. Well, thank you, Dee Dee, for that great question, and there's a lot of different angles to it. One angle is how to get over a broken heart. The other angle is how you help a friend who has a broken heart? And those are radically different kinds of questions. Let's first of all address your question directly. How would you help a friend who has a broken heart? Well, I get a question every day on this type of topic. How can I help my son who has this problem? How can I help my wife, my husband, my colleague? And so we did a special podcast on this, podcast 164, which is on how to help and how not to help. We just recorded it. And it was published, it was on October 28th, 2019, which is coming up, but we've already recorded it. And the essence of that is it would be extremely important not to try to help your friend, and any attempt to help your friend is likely to end in frustration for both of you. And what that means in a nutshell, and you can listen to that podcast number 164, is most people who are hurting, they want someone to listen and to understand their pain using the 5 secrets of effective communication. If you try to help somebody, they'll typically get irritated and yes but you and make excuses why this or that won't help. A second fantastic podcast to listen to was with my colleague Jill Levitt, who I have described as possibly the world's greatest communicator. That's what I said in the workshop, how I introduced her, and then someone sent an email, "See, you're right, she is the world's greatest communicator," and it kind of hurt. I hope people get that joke. But anyway, Jill is just super fantastic. And we also had a podcast on how to help loved ones who are hurting and common errors that people make. And that's podcast 146. It was published on June 24th of 2019. Now, what could your friend do? And I'm not recommending you try to help your friend, but I wrote a book about this called Intimate Connections, and there's a chapter on how to get over a broken heart, and it has to do with the power dynamics of dating and what happens. It's when you get rejected by someone. There's this thing I call the Burns rule. And the Burns rule is people never want what they can get, which you found out, Michael, and people always want what they can't get. So when someone rejects you, they're what you can't get, so you idolize them and you think they're better than cottage cheese or French fries or whatever, and it's very, very, very painful.
Yeah.
The book is just, Intimate Connections is chock full of ways to improve your love life, your dating life, how to get people to chase after you, and how to avoid making mistakes like that. And I even give personal examples of that, and you know how I work through that. And so if you want to pick that up, it's a mass market paperback. It's very inexpensive on Amazon. Another resource for him would be Feeling Good, the New Mood Therapy. And there's a chapter in there called The Love Addiction, and it's about a woman who was rejected by her husband because he wanted to have an affair with his secretary. And she had the belief, I can't be happy without John's love, just like your friend has this belief, he can't be happy without the love of this woman who has rejected him. And that is a very heartwarming chapter. The story had a fantastic outcome with this woman. That would be good for him too. But the last thing I want to mention, then I'll bring in you guys, is that what we've learned in team CBT is motivation is incredibly important. And people who are suffering always have ambivalence or resistance to change. And can you guys think of any reason why this guy might not want to let go of his suffering, his feeling of depression and loneliness without this woman who rejected him?
I mean, he could have a victim identity. I don't know him. It's a guess. He could be having an identity out of suffering because that sort of gives you something to do and that kind of a thing.
That's a thought. And you have any, Dave?
I mean, it's possibly somewhat of protection against moving on and having, that by holding on to this thing, that it protects him from actually having to go out and find someone.
That's exactly right. That's powerful. And then the other thing, it allows him to continue the relationship with her.
Right.
Yeah, and so those motivational things have to be addressed. And there's a lot that he could learn about why she rejected him. And there's even a chapter in Intimate Connections on how to communicate with someone who's trying to reject you. There's a lot of tremendous opportunities for him for growth, for spiritual enlightenment, for getting his love life transformed and fulfilling and meaningful. But the first thing is he looking for help, and we can say right ahead of time that he's not. He may somewhat want help, but he wants to keep ruminating about this woman and idealizing her. And as you pointed out, Michael, sometimes we like to feel sorry for ourselves. I remember once when I was jogging home from the train station in Philadelphia, I'd had this bad experience with this patient, and I was real angry with her. And I felt like a victim, like she was being unfair to me, and so I was telling myself, well, David, you have tools to overcome this. Yeah. Would you want to use the tools, or do you want to keep feeling like a victim and feeling sorry for yourself? And then I shouted out loud, I want to feel like a victim. Yeah. So then I said to myself, okay, David, you can do that. How long would you like to feel like a victim? And I said, another 24 hours. So I said, okay, I'll feel like a victim and be real pissed off and feel sorry for myself and self-righteous for 24 hours. And then I'll pick up the tools and use them. So I just moped for 24 hours. And then I said, okay, enough of this. And then I looked at, the errors I'd made with her. And I called her on the telephone and said, I thought I really screwed up the session earlier in the week, and I just want you to know I'm looking forward to meeting with you and, working that through and developing a better relationship. And she loved it, and it turned the therapy around. But we all sometimes want to feel like victims, and that's a part of our human nature.
And the other thing is that, by continuing to stay mentally in the relationship, even though he's not really in it, it's on some level maybe proving his love for the ex.
Oh, that's another huge thing. It shows how deep, and better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all. And shows how wonderful his love is. And then the last thing I would say, it's easy to get impatient with someone like this. And I bet the woman who wrote in is kind of frustrated and a little annoyed with him. It wouldn't surprise me. But it's something most of us have to go through growing up and learn to get over this. It's kind of a phase.
Good for Dee Dee for writing in for her friend.
Yes, it shows how loving she is.
So much about David.
Yeah, absolutely.
I also feel like it is important. I mean, you just were saying it, I think, but just to emphasize, I think it is important to honor that there is a process that I think we all have to go through. Like, I'm sure that this man really loved this woman, and it is a really, a tough thing. And, I don't think most of us are designed just, my X number of year marriage broke up. Let's hop back out on Tinder or whatever. Right. I think most people need a little time. But I certainly, to your point about not helping, like there's nothing, Dee Dee can't really help this person the way she probably wants to, but I think she can be helpful by listening and providing empathy, and just making sure she doesn't give him advice or
and that's why she needs to listen to those two podcasts to really learn how to do that, and that's the message all of our listeners need. Totally.
Yeah, no, and I was lucky to do a workshop with David on advanced empathy last week, and we learned the 5 secrets of effective communication. And I think that would be really, really helpful in this case, because our basic knee-jerk reactions in this kind of a situation, like where you're trying to help a friend go through a painful time, are wrong. Like, you provide solutions, for example. Like, it's typically not what they want. So I think the 5 secrets could be a really helpful way to talk to your friend.
All right, thank you, gentlemen.
Okay,
what time did we start? Do you recall?
We are. I think we have time for. Well, let's see how this next one goes, and then
the third one is a shorty.
All right, so let's do the shorty then. This is a question that was submitted by our friend Mark Noble on behalf of one of his colleagues at the University of Rochester. I'm just going to ask you broadly, David, and since his email is not in the form of a readable question here, how would you treat someone with anorexia nervosa?
Yeah, that's the question. I have several things to say about about that. One of the first patients I treated with what is anorexia nervosa? It's this situation where people take thinness so seriously, women in particular, and teenagers and young adults, but men can get it too. They actually go into kind of fasting and start losing dangerous amounts of body weight, and yet they still think they're fat.
Yeah.
And I don't mean to use a loaded word, but that's how they think. That's what they're telling themselves. And so they'll just starve themselves and exercise strenuously and get down to where they're so thin that it's a danger of dying, and quite a number of them do die up from anorexia nervosa, although there are effective treatments now. But the young woman, and one of the problems is when you get so thin, your brain gets starved of nutrients, and so they go into kind of an abnormal mental state that's like due to this nutritional imbalance. So they really can't see that they're on the verge of dying. They just think they're becoming thinner and more attractive, and they really look like concentration camp victims. I saw a woman at Stanford on the inpatient unit, and she came in to the daily. As part of my volunteer work, I created the daily cognitive therapy program on the inpatient unit, and then I would go in once a week to direct the groups, although the groups happened every day. So I was in there one day, and one of the patients came in, was in a wheelchair with intravenous fluids and a tube in her nose, a feeding tube, and I asked what the problem was, and she said she was being treated for anorexia nervosa. And I said, "How are you doing?" And she says, "Oh, I'm doing great. I've gained 10 pounds. And I said, "Oh, well, that's wonderful. How much do you weigh now?" She said, 58 pounds. It was just, I couldn't believe it. But it was so sad. But the patient I treated at Penn, she had been discharged for a similar thing from our hospital at the University of Pennsylvania, and she just wanted to come to sessions and talk. And she didn't want to do any cognitive therapy work. And I was really concerned about her weight because it was still a medical emergency. And we went into this kind of power struggle. And I used to, before I had all the resistance busting techniques I have now, I used to get into this a lot with patients. And what we finally made was a deal, was that if she would keep her weight above a certain level, and do the psychotherapy homework, then we could spend half of each session just talking about whatever she wanted, and I would listen and support her. And then we'd spend half of the session going over the psychotherapy homework and teaching her skills to change her life, how to relate to guys, how to have successful love relationships, and how to not be manipulated by guys, and all of that stuff. And that worked out really well. There's a new treatment from the Maudsley in London, and I think I have a tremendous respect. I know you're from London, but I think the British mental health professionals are pretty terrific, and their research is terrific because it's not all this money-making thing. Mm-hmm. It's more into science, and a good treatment was developed at the Maudsley for anorexia nervosa that has a 50% success rate, which is very high for this horribly severe disease. And I call it coercive therapy. They don't like to call it that. They have a fancy name for it, but that's what it is. And what it amounts to is, let's say you had anorexia nervosa, and we're your daddy and mommy here. So what it amounts, first of all, they have to work with the parents and say, you have to work as a team to force your child to eat. If you have to sit there 12 hours, it makes no difference. No one's going to leave this table until the child has eaten. And then, like you and I, Dave, would be like mommy and daddy say, you're going to have to eat this food in front of you. And the child will say, I'll eat a half a pea or something like that, or I'll eat 1 grain of rice. And then we say, no, you're going to eat this whole thing. And then the child typically will scream, put on temper tantrums. It's a real power struggle. And it's crucial that the mother and father don't split, that they absolutely support each other and insist on that. And that often works. They break it. It's almost like breaking a wild horse or something. And it sounds maybe cruel.
So I'm just curious, why does that? Do you think that works?
Well, I think that was my other point, that mothers and fathers have more power than they think if they have a loving relationship and help each other. But the problem is they argue.
I agree with that.
And then the kid falls into the crack in the middle, and nothing changes. And parents working together as a team can cure almost anything in a child, not just anorexia nervosa, by working as a team. And I've talked about that with our own kids on our earlier podcasts, how like our son and daughter used to fight horribly. And Senia was like a junior in high school, and Eric was like in 7th grade or something. And we'd be at dinner, and they'd be screaming at each other, "Oh, it's his fault. Oh, it's her fault." This type of thing. And it were really, kind of violent with each other. And then one day, Melanie and I said, let's just do our thing. And so at dinner, they started doing it. And I said, Senia's going to go away to college next year, and you kids have to love each other. And so your fighting is going to stop today, and you're never going to fight again. And then they started screaming, well, what do you mean? He's a little jerk. Oh, she was hitting me, stuff like that. And then Melanie says, now, you listen to what your father just said. We mean business. You two are never going to fight again, and you're going to start loving each other and helping each other and forming a great relationship. It's starting right now at this instant, because Senia is going to go away to college, and this is your last chance as brother and sister to really develop a loving relationship. And then they tried to scream again, and I said, well, listen to what your mother just said. And then they calmed right down. And then later that evening, they were downstairs lying together on the carpet, and Senia was lovingly helping Eric with his homework, and they've had a great relationship ever since that time. I've never seen them really have a fight ever since that day.
So what is it? Because it's almost like the opposite of a paradoxical
yes, it is.
intervention.
Yes,
and
it
why
is.
does that work with parents, but it wouldn't work if it was, if a therapist had told them to do that? I would imagine you would say that it would have created the resistance that the therapist was trying to solve.
That's a fantastic question, and there is a incredibly brilliant and lucid answer that Michael will give us.
I just need to go to the bathroom.
We'll have to think about that and answer that the next time. But I think just for one thing, sometimes when kids are little, parents have to say, this is the law right now. Yeah. They have to use power as well as love and understanding. And I think children want to be loved, and they want to be loved by parents who love each other. And so when they see the parents really setting that limit and supporting each other, I think suddenly the children feel a sense of security, like there's control, that it's going to be safe here, good things are going to happen. But it's not automatic, because for years, Melanie's very smart. She's way smarter than I am, but I'm pretty smart and pretty argumentative. So we used to do battle all the time, and Melanie would say, oh, they need more love. I say, no, they need more discipline. So we didn't get anywhere. And the day we figured this out, it was just transformative. And it's to this day, it's the same thing, really. They're still our kids. We still love them. We still interact with them. Still, give guidance and feedback.
Well, I will have to submit an Ask David question for the full answer as to why someone, say a therapist or even a friend, Dee Dee, can't, sit her broken-hearted friend down and say, you got to get out there and get out there on Tinder or Coffee Meets Bagel.
Well, we will address it again, because that's a fantastic thing, and that's one thing I like about team. There's all these cool questions that come up, and then you get answers to them, and it advances the theory. So that's
when I think back to my own life of when my parents have cornered me and told me to do something, and they've been united. There's something that, yes, I agree, it's like a loving, supporting thing, but on the flip side, it's also like a very powerful thing.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like a big impenetrable wall. That it felt like that for me if they were both united and telling me to do something. I don't know, like as a kid,
Yeah.
is difficult to. You're outnumbered 2-1.
Yeah.
And you
That's
have this
right.
like really really strong bond to these people, and you don't really have much of a choice.
That's
unless
right.
you're like a really argumentative kid, and
That's
so I
that's
think,
right. See, parents have much more power than they think, but they're neutralizing each other's power. Because Melanie is very intimidating.
Yeah.
She's so smart, and she can just push me around anytime she wants. But I'm also intimidating, sometimes too intimidating. But you put the two of us together.
Yeah,
There's
there's not really any room for them to go.
Yeah.
But then the question is like, how do you get them to not like rebel, and
well, they have to use the 5 secrets and just say, if you want to be angry with me, or I want to hear what you have to say, because and then you use the 5 secrets. So it's like yin and yang. You combine these two sources of power, and if you go too far in one direction, you get too mean.
Yeah.
And if you go too far in the other direction, then they can walk all over you.
Yeah. And if you guys aren't united, then you're screwed.
Yeah.
So I actually have a theory about why it works.
Oh, tell us.
Should I tell you now, or should we say?
Yeah.
So I think that the difference is that in the case of the children, that the children's actions are often trying to actually get the parents to do something or be a certain way.
Yeah.
So that your kids fighting may have been a way that they wanted, ironically, to bring you together, or they were. Maybe they were modeling something they saw in the two of you, and by acting that out, forced you and Melanie to resolve that, and so that it really, like, their actions are actually about the parents, and so it's therefore that the parents.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant. Can I give one more quick example?
Please.
Then maybe we'll have to save the fourth cool question, make for a separate podcast, but. We were over at the house of 2 friends in Philadelphia we love dearly, and one was a psychiatrist who's one of the top students in my class at Amherst, so he's kind of like a genius. And then his wife was an attorney and also had a social work degree, so she's a huge powerhouse. And I probably said this a year ago on a podcast, but it's so connected with what you're saying. And they were over at our house, and we were learning bridge, and they had 2 children, and we told the kids to go downstairs and play with ours. But their little boy, who was 5, kept running around the dining room table screaming while we were trying to learn bridge. And then these 2 people were saying to each other, like, well, change their names, but let's say the husband was saying, oh, we just can't control him no matter what we say. He just has ADHD or something. It's just kind of hopeless. And then his wife would say to the little boy who's running around in a circle, oh, Michael, won't you please go downstairs? And of course, he'd just keep screaming. And then the husband would say, see, there's nothing she can do. And I got so pissed off, or excuse the language, ticked off, that I just stood up in front of him. I jumped out of my chair. I said, Michael, stop right now. And I mean business. I'm going to tell you what you're going to do. You're going to turn around and you're going to walk downstairs and you're going to play with the other kids. You're going to have a very good time and you're not going to bother us. And I mean business. Do you get it? And he said, oh, yes. And then he turned around, went down, and apparently he had just a wonderful time.
He needs to know how to lay down the law.
And then my wife said, well, I think what's happening here is that the parents want the children to act out because they were over-controlled when they grew up. They were from a very religious, conservative upbringing, and they had to follow all of these rules. And she's saying maybe they subconsciously want to enable this. Now, I will have to say that both boys grew up to be fantastic, and they went to Yale, actually.
Yeah, this is actually about me.
Yeah.
That's a joke.
But it's like what you said, they're maybe behaving the way the parents kind of enable them to behave.
Yeah.
And I think, I was like that too, because I was kind of like a little kind of a wimp when I was growing up, and then Eric got very aggressive. And I thought, oh, good, he's going to beat the tar out of some other kids. That's what I always wanted to do. So just like what you're saying.
Yeah, interesting.
Cool. Well, I think
Okay.
we will stop for now. We have a fantastic question, and maybe we'll even record it as a separate podcast today, the wellness one.
Oh yeah, so
It
we
could
can
be a little
we
short.
can do battle.
Yeah, exactly. But thank you all for listening. And again, the only other message we have for you is that the word of mouth, until we got Michael and my new website ticking here, which is going to become a marketing powerhouse, we hope, was that you're our marketing. And someone just went to her doctor and said, oh, there's this doctor in Walnut Creek, and she tells every single patient, this is a medical doctor, to listen to the Feeling Good podcast. And so if you have friends who you think might be interested, maybe struggling with anxiety or shyness or low self-esteem or depression or troubled relationships or addictions, turn them on to the Feeling Good podcast. Everything is totally free of charge. We don't even have sponsors. And anything you can do to kind of help us out. I think this month again we'll hit 85 or 90,000 downloads, and we want to see it keep growing. And so thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank
you,
you.
Michael.
Thank you,
For
guys.
listening.
This has been another episode of the Feeling Good podcast. For more information, visit Dr. Burns' website at feelinggood.com, where you will find the show notes for this episode under the podcast page. You will also find archives of previous episodes and many resources for therapists and non-therapists. We welcome your comments and questions. If you want to support the show, please share the podcast with people who might benefit from it. You could also go to iTunes and leave a 5-star rating. The theme music is Gypsy Jazz in Paris, 1935, composed and performed by Brett Van Donsel. I am your host, Rhonda Borowski. We hope you enjoyed this episode. I invite you to join us next time for another episode of the Feeling Good podcast.